Hello and welcome. I'm Kylee Stone, your host of The Uncharted Leader and your coach in creating a new paradigm of leadership. Firstly, welcome back, everybody. For my regular listeners who are here, thank you. I do want you to know that I am very humbled to have you here and participating in this conversation as we really embark on the creation of a new future when it comes to leadership specifically and what that means. And many of you who have been on this journey with me will know that it really is my intention to dismantle the view and the system and the approach that we have been born into and raised in and lived in, and in many cases thrived in for many years. I don't have the answers, as many of you well know. My intention here is that you participate in this conversation with me such that you lead in your own life, whether that's in your own business, in your career, in a leadership position, and I distinguish those as two separate things, and your life. Today, and if you're new, welcome. If this is your first time joining, you are in for a treat. Today, we are going to be talking about progress. And I think I'm going to actually start today with actually handing over to an extraordinary woman who has been disruptive in the law and legal industry, much the same as my commitment in the space of leadership. She is doing this for lawyers and more importantly for the people that they serve, to ensure that there is a better working relationship and a better outcome for everybody that's involved. So Karen Finch is the CEO of Legally Yours. Her bio, honestly, I was beside myself reading this, thinking, oh my goodness, how does this woman get time to breathe? So I'm going to briefly start, and then I'm going to, so the topic today is called the progressive law movement, which is something that Karen has coined. So professionally speaking, she's the CEO of Legally Yours. She's the Vice President of the Australian Legal Tech Association. She's a lead organiser for the Women of ALTA, which we call an acronym of WALTA. She can talk to me more about that as we get into the conversation. She's a legal tech editor for Idea Spies, a law reference committee member for CQ University Law School, and she's an event organiser for the Silicon Beach Australia startup community and a passionate ambassador for what we're talking about today, which is the progressive law movement and progress in the area of law. Karen, firstly, thank you for joining me today. It really, I'm so looking forward to this talk with you.
Well, thank you, Kylee. And I think, I just want to first up say meeting you and being in your world is a complete and utter privilege. And I feel the same way about you. So I'm really, really excited to be here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And if we were 5-year-old kids in person, we could high five.
Going into it eventually. We can still do that.
Yeah, that's right. So look, I do, there are so many different places, as you know, that we could have started talking today because, there are a few things, and we landed on the topic of progress because of what you shared briefly with me about it. But the other reason the other thing I'm very interested in unpacking with you today is the word purpose, because, I think it's kind of paralleled with progress, is that organizations and individuals starting organizations these days are pretty much wedded to creating a business and a life that's based on purpose. And I know yours in particular has started out of a purpose. So I'm not going to start there yet, though, because I have no doubt that as soon as you start telling me about that story, we're going to end up in a whole world about that. So I'm going to ask you if you can please start, though, with telling me about this phrase, the progressive law movement, how it started and what is it about?
Absolutely. So around about 2015, we began to see this term coming out called new law. And new law really was a term to sort of kind of categorize the new type of lawyer that we were beginning to see and the new type of law firm that was beginning to be set up. And really, when you think about it, what was sort of happening at that time was that, we had the rise of legal technology coming through, lawyers being able to harness that and really use that within their practice. And so lawyers were starting to really begin to think about, well, what is it that we actually do? What is the service that we provide to clients? How do we do it? And maybe there's a different way beyond sort of the old law mechanism, which is this, traditional billable hours, billable units kind of system that we've had since the 1980s. So that was sort of happening back then. And it really kind of started, and I like to always say, it starts with price with lawyers. So lawyers are very wedded to the fact that they think their value they give to clients is their time. And I talk very passionately to the lawyers and to the legal community to say, I'm yet to hear a client say to me, oh, Karen, I absolutely love that lawyer. They spent so much time with me. They don't care how much time you spend with them. What they care about is your communication, your empathy, your listening skills, the ability that you give them to be able to let them sleep at night because you've taken on their legal problem and you're giving them peace of mind. And so as we saw this sort of rising, I guess for myself, and this is something we'll probably refer back to, but this whole movement around the rejection of we're only a time-based service industry, we don't tell people, our clients up front, how much we're going to cost because it's all too difficult because it's time. We really started to see that changing in around that 2015. As we've progressed along, what we've now found is that the legal industry has had what I call a bit of an awakening, where they're really now starting to think about these things and really start to look at, well, what is our value? What is it that we actually do? And if we don't create these law firms that are set up to actually service clients that need them, then we're just very, very smart people sitting in an office on our own. So they really need to wake up. And, Kylee, as I mentioned to you in previous conversations, the stats will tell us that 70 to 80% of people who have a legal need actually don't engage with a lawyer. And I don't think as an industry, we have properly realised how many people are not accessing legal services when they need to. And we know as a profession, the earlier that you get the right legal information, it can be life-changing. It can be the difference between your business thriving and your business going bust. It can be the difference between you having an amicable separation or one that ends up in the courts and 10 years later, all your assets have gone and your children are screwed up. There really is that ability that I think lawyers are so privileged to hold the position that we do. We are the gatekeepers to justice. It's a vocation. Very similar to the medical profession. We have a standing where we are trusted advisors, and we need to get that back in the community. And, my big belief is that the progressive law movement recognise this. They recognise that they're trusted advisors. They, operate always on the basis that it's transparent, upfront pricing, it's fixed, it's communication, it's, education of their clients through the process. It's a journey. And they really are looking at, okay, who are my clients? How do they want their legal services delivered? And how can we facilitate that so we can start to make some inroads into the 70 to 80% who aren't engaging with us? And so that is the progressive law movement.
It is, and especially for those of you who are listening, and whether you have any particular interest in law or not, as you say, it kind of does touch everybody at some point in their needs. And I am actually quite surprised, and I did not expect this, but the parallel between what you're saying in terms of the role and responsibility that lawyers have and the missing part of engagement, and how directly correlated it is to leadership and the role that leaders have as advisors to their people, and the impact they also have on the livelihood of the people that they lead. And surprisingly, the same proportion of people who are disengaged with leaders. It is very, very similar. I mean, there's probably two different stats. The 85% of people unhappy at work, 65% said they'd forgo a pay rise to see their leaders fired. And I'm pretty sure it's upwards of 80% who feel their leaders are disengaging. So I'm just really quite shocked at, like just the similar relationship between engagement and the role that's happening in your industry.
Absolutely. And lawyers tend to be leaders in, I mean, that's where we've always come from. And, I'm very privileged that I get to, be in the world of some of these amazing, people in law who practiced before billable hours were introduced. And I think, we tend to think that this sort of billable hour, billable unit model was always how we practice law. And it just wasn't. Prior to that, lawyers had a standing in the community. We would have clients come in, we would give them advice, we would guide them, and then we would say, right, that's going to cost you this much. That was the way it was. But
right.
when billable hours became introduced, it kind of made us all lazy in a way, because all we had to do was keep churning over time, and that was what we were justifying as the value that we were providing the client. So nothing was based on relationship, nothing was based on our communication, nothing was based on our output. And what I'm really, so incredibly passionate about, my kind of mission in life and what we're doing with Legally Yours is we're trying to show the profession that there is a different way to be a lawyer, and it's a way that you can return back to the vocation that we all began in our law degrees and why we chose to go down this path. But we can do it and have better relationships with our clients, but we can also be better people ourselves, because when we're not having these toxic relationships with clients whereby we're just sending them these invoices, they don't want to pay them because they're thinking, hold on, you never told me I was paying for the conversation of the 15 minutes of this, and this. And, then they shut down and your relationship breaks down. You can have all that wonderful client relationship, well-being, work-life balance, because you're understanding what your output and value is. But then, Kylee, the most important thing is that we are starting to make ourselves more accessible to everyone, for everyone that has legal needs. And you are 100% right. When you look at all the different touch points in law, and I say to people all the time, there are so many times in your life where you will need legal advice, legal information. And if we can just make it safe, simple, trusted, easy, convenient, tap in, tap out, it just makes things so much easier for people. They get to have that opportunity and those options to make, good choices around the decisions that they're making, both in business and in their personal lives. And everyday people have the opportunity to really make a difference in the legal world, because they're really pivotal to this progressive law movement. Because if they're making the choice to only use lawyers who operate in the progressive law movement and operate in this way of, language of fixed price or value-based pricing, they are sending a very, very clear message to the legal industry that this is how they want the legal services delivered. And when you nut it down, as I mentioned before, if lawyers don't have clients, they're just smart people sitting in the office twiddling their thumbs. So I really want people to know that they have a huge influence on what the legal industry can change to and how they can deliver. And I want them to take up that challenge and help us with the progressive law movement.
Well, it just seems natural for me to do this right at this point. It's not something that we do until we get to the end. But anybody who's listening, if you've got a pen and piece of paper right now, it's legallyyours.com. Is that correct?
.au.com.au, yes.
Right, go look, because immediately as I was listening, of course, I started thinking about all the areas of my life where I probably avoided doing it myself, because I did the same thing. I'm like, oh God, where do I start? In fact, the two times I've actually had to do something, I reached out to a friend of mine who I thought, oh, he'll have a contact. And as it happened, he did. So I went that route. But there are also many other things just on a day-to-day basis. There are other circumstances where I've actually thought to myself, oh, I should probably talk to a lawyer about that. But then I put it off. Oh, it's too hard, So if that's you folks, legallyyours.com.au. Right. So I wanted to come back because you said your mission is not just this, you said in life, right? So I kind of now want to just touch on that, because I know that the things that you've been sharing are not just applicable to everybody else. You had this was a very personal kind of decision of yours starting when you were a teenager, is that right?
Absolutely correct. So I was one of those typical, sort of lawyer wannabes who really. So back in my day, it was all about apartheid, was, very much in the news and very much, in our world. And I thought, if I can get my law degree and go study law, I can emancipate all the South Africans from apartheid. And the reason I share that is because I know 99.9%, because I spend a lot of time with law students in my world, talking to them, and they all, 99.9% of them will say, I'm doing this because I want to help people. I want to do good in the world. And this is the personality type that you're dealing with in law. They really do want to do good things and great things with their minds and help people. So I kind of, had that aspiration inside me. But when I was about 16 years old, I still have a serial entrepreneur of a father who always had lots of different businesses, and he was always coming up with different great business ideas, and some were successful, some not so what, but, watched him go through that journey. And when I was about 16 years old, one of his businesses ended up in a commercial litigation matter with a big corporate. And so obviously, went down that track of getting lawyers and going through that process. So what actually unfolded for the next 7 years was absolutely horrific for my parents, and watching that. And it wasn't actually the litigation itself with the corporation that was, ultimately the undoing. It was actually the way that their lawyers communicated with them throughout the process. So they didn't educate them. They didn't inform them about mediation. They didn't tell them about the costs. Costs kept running up. Ultimately, what happened was they got to the doorsteps of the court and they sort of said to my parents, well, unless you've got $50,000 in our trust account, we're not going in. Obviously, my parents at that point had run out of all money. We ended up losing our family home. And I think through that experience, I really realised kind of two things. One was the responsibility that those lawyers had to their clients just wasn't there. They weren't trusted advisors. They were doing this to rack up costs to get to a point to getting to court. There was no care. There was no education. There was no empathy. And then the other thing I realized that was there was something fundamentally wrong with that system, because if the lawyers, if the interaction between my parents and the lawyers was one of, okay, we're going to guide you through this, we want you to get the best result, we're going to educate you, my parents would not have got to that point. They would have settled, probably, 5 years before, but they were never given those options. And so part of when I was going through my law degree, I was like, I want to get out and I want to face those lawyers, and I want to make sure that no other client ever has to experience that devastation that can be caused, and sort of get away with it. They were still practicing in law. So for me, that was the fire in my belly of why I wanted to become a lawyer. And so went through obviously the law degree during that time, got my articles and came out. And Kylee, I to this day, that moment of that first day of legal practice for me, so I was qualified as a lawyer, I'd been admitted, I was sitting in my pinstripe suit with my big shoulder pads and my stockings, as we do. Thought I was Ally McBeal because, that was the way. And I remember the partner of the law firm who I was underneath saying to me, congratulations, you're now a qualified lawyer. So every time you think about your client, you think about them for 1 minute, you bill them for 6, you get 5-minute credits, and this is how you're going to be a successful lawyer. And I kind of went, what? And it's like, that's what it is. And so we were, particularly in those early days of me being a junior lawyer, it was all about bill, bill, bill. There was no discussion around outcome, quality of relationships, what you're actually delivering. It was all about billable units. And so understandably, I think you probably know what happened then is that I thought that I'd failed. So I left the law thinking there must be something fundamentally wrong with me, because I can't operate this way. Everyone else seemed to be doing all the amazing people I went to university with, they all seemed to be doing it. Why couldn't I do it? So I ended up leaving the law, and probably for about 10 years after that would refer to myself, and people say, what do you do? And I got into another profession, into recruitment. I used to say, oh, well, I'm a failed lawyer. So I guess what you can kind of see is that, all of that stuff that happened back then has kind of rolled into this opportunity where I now get to actually take that little Ally McBeal wannabe junior lawyer with all that creativity and justice, and, you know, just wanting to do good. And now I get to actually put it into action. We get to, you know, get these wonderful lawyers together who think and believe and want to practice in this way. We get to connect them with the clients that want it, and we get to see I tell you this, Kylee, every time I see one of those connections happen through Legally Yours, it's like a joy bubble comes out of me. It's like we're righting another wrong. We are righting another wrong. We are getting them the legal advice they need. And so, yes, this is not just a business that, you know, we've started up and, you know, it's going well and we're proud of. This is a mission. This has the ability to change the whole profession, and it has the ability to change the way people access and just open up that 70 to 80%. And you know, I couldn't be more, you know, sort of grateful that I get that opportunity to be part of that, and to be in it. So yeah, you're right. It's my mission.
It's like the perfect storm. It's like, I mean, you know, just so, you know, yeah. I mean, you know, the connections and the dots between all of it and where you've landed and what you're doing. It's just really extraordinary, really just extraordinary. And so I've got a couple of things I now want to ask you, given this, right? One is, if you know, it sounds to me like we should just stick you on the TED stage. Yeah, I'm going to come back to this one. That's right, folks. Just before we jumped on live, I asked Karen about her TED Talk and whether she's done one, and she goes, no, not yet, we said. So I'm going to, you know, I'm bringing this conversation up in here because it was just fabulous, and I you know, I really loved how, you know, whilst we hear, because, you know, look, we hear people's stories, or not, even if we don't hear people's stories, we look at people and we make massive assumptions, right? And I think what's there for me, Karen, is, you know, I would say, oh, it sounds like the perfect storm, but that would be an illusion, and would undermine the reality of what that journey was like, right? And so because of that context, what I'm present to asking you about is what you would call your TED Talk, because when we got on, you were telling me, I was like, oh, really? Right. So, okay, that kind of tells me a lot about your journey, I think. So what would you call it?
Well, I think I said to you, complete genius or utter fool. Because I think for me, you know, that's the thin line that I've tracked. And you have to remember, when you know, Legally Yours has been around since 2014. I became, you know, very, very involved in 2015. And I was sitting there talking to lawyer after lawyer, to law firm partner after law firm partner, and saying, did you know that there's 70 to 80% of these people out there that if you just deliver your legal services in this way, will come to you? It's business. You know, people are wanting this. If you can just deliver it. And they would keep saying to me time and time again, no, we won't do it. We're traditional. No, our clients love it when we just send them invoices and they don't know what it's for. And, you know, and I would sit there saying, well, how do you know? Well, they pay it. Oh, of course they pay it, because they're scared not to, but they probably told 20 people, don't ever go to that lawyer ever again. And, you know, I've had to really, and the reason why I say complete genius or utter fool, it's the fine line that I'm on all the time, because part of me has that imposter syndrome where I sit here thinking, what are you doing? How can this failed lawyer possibly be sitting here telling a profession that, you know, this is the way it needs to work? You know, am I a complete genius or am I an utter fool? And, you know, I think I was mentioning to you before that, you know, in my sort of after, you know, in my 50s, when I'm sitting back reflecting on this journey, that, you know, I thought a title of my book could be What the F Was That? Because, you know, it really, you have to have conviction, you have to have passion. You know, I talk in the sense that I've got this little fire in my belly that never goes out. It's like the pilot light in your fireplace that never goes out. And, you know, sometimes the wind knocks it out and you think it's, oh God, you know, is it still there? It's never gone. And it just hasn't, because I know, and I've seen it and we've watched it. If we can just get the people behind us on this, we can get the legal industry all looking at this progressive law movement. What we can create is amazing, and it's a dream. Like so I'm that would be it. That would be it. To be continued.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm recreated again, right? And given that this podcast is for those in leadership and it's kind of context about what this new world looks like, it's just a complete parallel also with my experience in leadership, right? You know, the failed leader running a podcast about this new paradigm of leadership, you know, because and I'm going to mention this one in this with you because I think I'm interested in a couple of other things that I've read about you. One is this Walter acronym, and also, so two things, that one, and there's a reference to this. I'm fascinated about what this thing about Silicon Beach is about. So
yes.
When 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder, Karen, and I got to, you know, executive level leadership in media, really, Karen, loved my job. Loved my job. Loved what I did, loved the people that I worked with, like, you know. So when I had three children in the space of 3 years, crazy. Was not planned, by the way. So it wasn't, I can't kind of take on that I actually am crazy, because anyway, that's another story. But I went back. I did not want to lose my job. I kept going back. I went back time and time. I got 2 or 3 promotions, I think, in the space of those 3 years with my kids, right? It was not a problem until the third one, right? And then the third one comes and I go, I cannot keep doing this. But my boss wanted me in the job full time. I wanted part-time, split the role. Long story short, I was then bitter because I lost all the parts of the jobs that I really loved, right? So there I am, supposedly still being treated as a leader of the organization, which I can get, right? Except, there's my office sitting outside the boardroom while they're in there having the conversation about the future of the company and the staff and blah, blah, blah. And I'm no longer involved, right? So that point became a real turning point for me, you know, is like, how do I read Robin Sharman's How to Be a Leader Without a Title.
Love it.
Start my journey, right? About how do I get to fulfill on my desire to have an impact on others, be a contribution, be a leader, and not have the position of it. Because, you know, quite frankly, these 9 to 5 hours of Monday to Friday were just not workable for me. And it's still not workable for me. Yeah. So, anyway, I'm reminded of that because it was a parallel to what you were saying about your progression. But so given that, right, so here I am having this conversation about leadership, and technically speaking, like, I've got no experience in HR. I've got bloody amount of experience kind of in being a leader specifically, but that failed experience.
Yes.
So I want to put the spotlight on that story, and I want to flick it to you about Walter, right? And because you and I have got a very similar view also about leadership and in leadership. Why Walter? What is it about, and what is your mission there?
So Walter, and we're the only, so I became involved with the Australian Legal Tech Association, obviously because we've set up Legally Yours, which is an online legal marketplace. And so this is the world that we also, so we sort of fit within the world of legal tech, and, you know, entrepreneurship, startup land. So that's kind of where we fit in the scheme of things. And so when Alta set up, we had a brilliant president in the name of Jodie Baker, who really, her mission was to really try and get the women in the room. Because what we were beginning to see is that, particularly when you take legal and then you take tech and you put it together, is that females are so underrepresented. We get 2% of the funding that's out there. There were so many, like you've just said, we're trying to fit ourselves into a system that was not built for us. And I just want to pause there, because you and I had a conversation about this previously, where we were talking about, you know, I think, you know, we were told, you know, 50, 60 years ago that if we just kind of got these rights, and if we did this, and if we made ourselves look like this, and we got educated, we would then be equal. But what I think there's been a realization, particularly in the last sort of 12 months with COVID and what happened in all that environment, is that the system is not built for us. It's not. And we're never going to be equal in this system because it doesn't take into account, what we are, the circumstances that we live around. I had 4 kids in 3.5 years, similar to you with the twins, because I had the twins. But I get it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was shut out of a career. I was shut out for a career for 8 years because it was sort of like no one could accommodate where I was sitting, and how it worked, and our family unit either, with where it worked. So, Walter was sort of started to say, let's just get us in the room. Let's get the women in law. Let's get the women in legal tech, and let's talk about what's unique to us. So, we've been doing that for a couple of years, and the conversations are really incredibly rich around the frustrations around, even, like you mentioned about being shut out of the boardroom, women, and this is something that's not really talked about, but, there was a whole kind of push in legal to say that, all the big T firms had to put a certain quota of women in their partnership level, which is great, good, first step move. But the problem with that is that they don't have to actually declare how many are equity and how many are salaried. So most of the women they promote into partnership to get their quotas will be salary partners, but they don't really have a proper seat at the table in terms of equity partnership within these firms. So they're not making decisions around, the actual kind of running of the firm or the equity part. And again, it's this ability of, we're sort of it's a tokenism. Oh, we've got the woman in the room, we've got the woman in the room, but really, are they allowing us to speak? And I know you and I spoke about, we want to get off this bus that's, going through, and we want to get into the convertible that's speeding off down the track and make our own way. So Walter is very much about that. We are producing, at the moment, we're writing a white paper on exactly all of the data around this to expose, I guess, and put it on the table of what really the situation is. But then we want to go one step further, and we want to throw out challenges. We want to challenge government. We want to challenge the legal industry. We want to challenge the tech industry to say, what are we going to do about this? What's the real actions? Whether it be from put the female voice in the room and then let her speak. Don't just put her in there and put her in the back corner, maybe getting the coffees or, writing the notes. The voices have to have meaning, and let's break the system, Kylee. Let's have the first realization that this system isn't necessarily for all of us. Let's build a new one. Let's build our own. And, Legally Yours in its very small way, we doing that. We recognized very early on, my business partner and I, that we have an opportunity to build a company for us, as well as do all those amazing things for the legal industry and for everyday people too. So our business is very much based upon, we've all got kids. We all do flexible remote. We're in the office, we're not in the office. But we run this business based upon, how we can live our lives. And yeah, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I do think you're onto it there. I think organizations, especially those that are, coming out of the startup community, really are starting from that place. And I think because there is a new way to approach the way they're thinking in the design, we will inevitably see, it's also one of those times, I think, there will, by default, over time, as those organizations grow, I think we will see a dropout of those that no longer serve and people shifting into that space. So, I guess I have become a little bit more, obviously it helps to have a voice to be moving those things forward. But I also think, it's the same thing with this, I kind of in a way got off the gender equality push, mostly because it's look, I get really hesitant to even say the words because interpretation is everything in the way that people listen. So if you're listening, I just want to be responsible for what I'm about to say. But my view is it's not gender. It's not actually gender, because if it was gender, then we wouldn't see any women at all in there. So it says to me that, and it's also not all men that are not pushing for it. So I just, if it was true that gender was the thing, then we wouldn't see any, men supporting, and we wouldn't see any women advancing. All right. And I can't say it as black and white or as simple as that without making it complicated. And for that reason, I like you, I think this thing, I really love what you're doing, Karen, calling this law, the progressive law movement, because I do think there is a conversation ultimately about movements that are really enabling people that are in the existing systems to try to look at better ways of doing things. And quite frankly, I just think that's the same in leadership and organizational structures, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think, the incredible thing is technology has been a major enabler in this conversation, because tech highlights all the things that we shouldn't be doing, which frees us up with the opportunity to actually look at all the things that we should be spending our valuable time on, which often then gives us the ability to sit back and think, right, what is it that we should be doing? How can we change things? How can we make things better? Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It might not be specifically in terms of gender. The one thing I do know is that when you get the right voice mix and you change the system to fit the voices in the room, whether they be, different cultural voices and, different sexuality, different, genders, whatever it is, what a brilliant conversation opens up, what a rich, amazing, world-changing conversation happens. You can't, having all of the same voice in a room, whether it be all women or all men, it's not the answer, is it? So
no, and I think you bring up a very good point. And I spoke last week with Oscar Trimboli, who's an expert in deep listening, and discovered that actually he applies the work of Miriam Rose, who's an Indigenous academic in that space.
Amazing.
And I'm reminded of that because, ultimately it's not about the talking that happens, it's about the listening that happens in the room. Because how many people would sit around a room and, whilst we talk and we look at people, it's hard to also see what diversity that individual represents. I mean, I'm probably a good example, being white, and yet I'm Indigenous. So, I think it sounds to me like there's a lot of value to bring leadership to enable diversity, to kind of be able to have that happen. And those two things are, it's not labeled on anything, right? It's really just a conversation.
Absolutely. And that power of listening and knowing when to listen, I think is a conversation that needs to have too. I need, there are points where we need to listen to others to hear that voice, and we can support in our listening as opposed to our talking if it's not the voice that's relevant in the room at the time. And, I think I might have been telling you this, I was at a dinner party recently and the men were sort of having a bit of a go at that, I got passed over for the promotion because the woman had to get it because, but I reckon I was the most qualified, blah, 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 poor me, victim. And I just sort of said to, one of them made the comment around, well, you really should engage with us. Women should engage with us because we can help solve your problems. We can help put you in these positions. And I said, no disrespect, and this isn't personal to you per se, but I said, your voice is not relevant in this conversation at this time. Your listening is. Listen to what we're saying and support us by listening. Let us have our voice. Let us talk about it. Let us get to that thing, and we will invite you back into the conversation to talk once we've had our say. And I think you can just, for every segment, you can kind of put those rules into place. So 100%, the listening is just an incredible conversation we need to have and need to undertake ourselves.
Well, thank you so much. And as always, we are going to close out with a request for you to complete a statement for me. Okay, so I'm going to say a few words and then your job is to complete the sentence, right?
Okay.
A leader is someone who?
A leader is someone who follows their passion, who remains committed in the face of adversity, who puts others before themselves and leads with their actions.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you.
You've really put me on the spot today.
I love it. I love it. I mean, really, it has been remarkable. And I did say I wanted to ask you about Silicon Beach, but I'm going to have to do that another time because
Oh,
there's been so much in this. And despite all good intentions of me trying to keep these podcasts to a good 40 minutes, I've gotten caught out a number of times. And it's, as you know, right, it can be difficult to find the time to get these things in to listen. So thank you to everyone who's joined today. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story and your passion. It's just, you're truly inspiring.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for everything you're doing and giving this platform for other people to listen. It's so important, isn't it? So thank you. And I admire and just, yeah, thank you. Admire you too.
Thank you. So again, we'll put the details on where you can connect with Karen. We'll put the details for LinkedIn, and we'll also put the link into Legally Yours. Be sure to check it out and to support the work you're doing. And obviously you can find out more about Karen off her LinkedIn profile as well. Thanks for joining, folks.